Welcome to episode 106 of the omnigamersclub podcast, the podcast for games on all platforms, including jumping puzzles. I am Daniel Winter.
And I'm Mark Uasa. Hello.
Hello, Mark. How are you this long weekend?
Yeah, I'm well. I just realized today, as I was dreading going back to work on Monday, that there is no work on Monday. So fantastic.
Yay.
The weekend continues. Always good news.
No,
For
unfortunately, I'm at a
Victoria
point
Day.
where being unemployed, the public holiday means having to watch the kids. So not exactly a public holiday for me. So
Yes. It only gets easier when the kids get older and they can mostly take care of themselves. Yeah. I feel your pain. All right, let's roll into it. I think we don't have a lot of news this week, right?
Yeah, well, so today we're going to be doubling up on our second, not really a double header, a single header, I guess. We're both talking about the same game this episode. That main feature is going to be Clair Obscur Expedition 33, which we'll be getting to later in this episode. But first, a couple of little appetizers to amuse-bouche away into the podcast, I guess.
And I think I want to clarify that, we're not, shifting back to the old model. It's just we always intended that there would be times when we would both cover the same game.
If we feel like there was a lot to say and we both had something to contribute to one game, absolutely,
right. Yeah. So we will still be doing double headers and single headers like this, but we'll mix it up as we go along.
This allows a little more flexibility based on how we're feeling about particular games.
Right. All right. You want to start us off with the appetizers?
Yeah, just a couple of little bits today, and slightly more positive news. A small item I found interesting was that Cole Worley, the designer of Root and Arcs, announced that his latest game, Molly House, co-designed by Joe Kelly, he announced that it's been released under the Creative Commons license, basically that the game is free to print and play, essentially, to make your own version of that game, and which I think is particularly interesting for a couple of reasons, partly that it's such a fascinating case study in historical moments and education. That game, but also its visual aesthetic as this sort of Victorian parlor game. I can imagine people sort of mocking up some quite interesting ways of printing that off and sort of polishing it off in their own unique ways to sort of look like a parlor game, and with custom pieces or whatever you have will you. And I obviously, I don't think it's going to be a sustainable way. Not every game can be, Creative Commons. I'm not entirely sure what the logic was there, but I just thought this was a really interesting case study in accessibility with games.
Yeah, maybe it's a reflection on the kind of situation happening right now with a lot of LGBTQ subject matter kind of being erased from a lot of places in right-wing authoritarian countries, like ones that are near us. So maybe this is a kind of a counter move to that, to say, here we're making this accessible so that everyone can know about the subject matter, which I think is about kind of closeted LGBTQ individuals in Victorian England. Is that right?
Yes. It is very important in that sense, yes. And as you mentioned, I guess it's quite possible this game cannot be sold in some countries, perhaps, which is all the more reason why making it accessible in this way is important.
Right. Very good. Okay. You said you have no bummers. I'm going to mention that I do have one short bummer. I promise I'm not going to be bummers every week. This one is my only one and a short one. So Bungie, the makers, famed original makers of the Halo series, original makers of the Marathon game back on Mac, are releasing a new Marathon game based in that universe. I think it's supposed to be an extraction shooter.
Yes.
There's a lot of betas going on right now. I don't believe it's out yet, but it's coming. And there's been a lot of attention on its new art style, and apparently they have been caught or called out for allegedly basically plagiarizing a well-known or an established visual artist called N2, I believe is the name. N2 at antire.al has called them out, showing side-by-side screenshots, like literal direct copies of this quite kind of starkly modern looking kind of UI. So I would recommend that people go check that out right now. Apparently, Bungie has been known to lift assets from artists' work before in the past without acknowledging their
There's
original
been
work.
various instances in the Destiny production, I believe, of
Right.
there was 2 or 3 different stories of plagiarism back then.
Right, and I thought even from seeing the original conceptual art for Destiny that it looked a lot like some of this manga artist I follow called Masamune Shiro, who was the original creator of the Appleseed and Ghost in the Shell mangas, and he's known for his kind of mech and robotics kind of artwork. And I thought some of the creatures and suits and vehicles in Destiny definitely lifted liberally from those sources. Have you heard anything about the story at all?
I didn't look into it too deeply, no. But I mean, obviously, all art is somewhat derivative, for better or worse. We were all inspired by other artists and everyone that came before. And it's especially tough, I imagine, in these large development teams. Like, you could have dozens of artists all working on this one project. It's hard to track what everyone is bringing into it in terms of inspiration, both explicitly and implicitly. But I mean, Bungie has admitted to this. They admitted that it was plagiarism. They alleged that it was an artist no longer with the company, which is awfully convenient, whether true or not, I will say. I mean, but you'd think, if this has happened multiple times before, that they would have put some checks and balances into place and making sure that this is not going to keep happening. Unfortunately, so many of these big studios only seem to care about plagiarism insofar that they'll get caught. And so many are now moving into AI, which is just a way of giving plausible deniability to whether anything is plagiarism at all.
Right. There's a article kind of laying out sort of the details of this case. I'll leave it up to the listener to decide for themselves. It's at vice.com. Article about Bungie's alleged plagiarism. And like, if you look at the side by sides closely, you'll see that they're like literally lifting multiple sequences of iconography, for instance. It couldn't be an accident. It's not like a blink and you'll miss it sort of thing. It's straight lifting.
In multiple instances. It's not just one graphic.
That's right. So that's all I wanted to mention. Tisk tisk, Bungie, not too impressive.
Just one other quick shout out as a follow up to the previous story, in a similar tangent to sort of scrappy handmade prototypes of games. There was just announced recently that there's a new convention coming here to Vancouver called ProtoCon. So this is focused on game designers and playtesters, essentially. There's been a bunch of similar conventions across North America and the world, I imagine. Oh, there you go. You found a flyer. I found one at a comic shop just yesterday. I think I just missed them by an hour when they were putting them up. But this is basically similar. I mean, ProtoCon itself is originally a Utah convention, I believe, and one of the organizers has moved here or was inspired by that. It's officially branded with the same the original convention's branding. The other big one, of course, is Unpub. I don't remember where the main one is, but they have sort of satellite events at a bunch of larger conventions like PAX Unplugged, which I've attended there. And it's just fascinating to see like people, really scrappy individuals showing off their games. Some just playtesting their games and polishing them up. Others games that will never be really fit for publishing, but they're passionate about them anyway and just working on it as an experiment, really. And it's fantastic to see this in light of also some of the indie markets you see popping up around North America. They're celebrating games that don't necessarily fit the traditional publishing model and just experimenting with some really neat ideas. So really excited to see what comes of ProtoCon. And I mean, Vancouver, we've often spoken about so many fantastic designers here. There's a strong game design scene here in Vancouver. So excited to see everyone come together.
That's right. Yeah, I was handed this flyer out at TCTC, so they were handing them out there as well. And I've been a part of, prototyping groups like the Vancouver Playtest Group, Vancouver chapter of the Canadian Game Designers Guild. So there's a lot of activity here. So it's great to see, people gathering. Very encouraging. And I think if anyone has a passing or a deeper interest in game design, that they should definitely get their game seen by people, touched by people, played by people as early as possible, because it's not a game unless it's played by real people. Otherwise, it's just a figment in your
Thought
mind.
Experiment.
Yeah, get it played.
Excellent. Well, look forward to checking that out. Okay, shall we get to our main feature?
Let's do it. The main course, which is once again the game you mentioned earlier. It is Clair Obscur Expedition 33 from French developer Sandfall Interactive. And a lot of people keep saying this is like a completely unpronounceable game. It's really, really bizarre because I think Clair just means clear, and obscure means obscure. So I don't really.
E on the end. How do you pronounce it?
Yeah, I guess it's mostly Americans that are having a hard time pronouncing this game.
Yes. So just to clarify, this is published by Kepler Interactive, released 24th of April 2025. Released on PlayStation, Xbox, and Windows.
Yeah,
so
it's a
pretty
really
hot
new game.
Release within a month.
Yeah, it's just a baby.
Yeah, I mean, I've been excited about this game since, was it Summer Showcase or one of the Xbox showcases, I think last year. It was one of their sort of primary announcements, and I remember being quite excited about the visual design of this game, especially very high concepts in its story and tone. So, I mean, shall we start a little bit with just talking about the story of this game?
Sure, let's do that. Yeah, I guess we're not going to spoil too much. I think we're going to, like usual, just set up the basic premise, something you can figure out in the first few minutes of the game.
It is quite interesting, though, in that the game doesn't really explain much. There's a lot of confidence in not giving you the exposition dump. Curiously, having come in from that trailer does give you the exposition dump, so I had sort of a general framing what was coming in here, but the game very much does not tell you what's going on. It's very much show, don't tell, and lets you soak in the universe and just gradually absorb what's going on here. But to be clear, it's quite a high concept story set in this, I don't know what the time period would be, sort of early 1900s, I guess, French city of Lumiere. The city is sort of cut off from the rest of the world, seemingly. There's some preceding apocalyptic event called the Fracture. Now there's a giant monolith on the horizon with the paintress, some sort of cosmic god, I guess, is painting a number on the monolith every year and slowly counting down. And every year, whatever that number is, everyone of that age is basically Thanos snapped out of existence, I guess.
Yeah, it's the timing is sort of indeterminate, like you say. It definitely has to be after the Paris World Exhibition in which they created the Eiffel Tower.
Yes,
because the Eiffel Tower is quite evident in the distance.
So melting like a candle, I guess.
Yeah, it looks quite distinctive. And later on, you see, like, spoiler alert, a little cake that has a Eiffel Tower decoration that's perfectly melted to match the current state of the Eiffel Tower. So it's definitely after that. And the aesthetics are very sort of 19th century as well. But they do have, they do have technology. They have, automata, and they have some sort of particle extraction device that the main character Gustave was known to have invented. So it's not like they don't have machinery.
It's not quite steampunk. It's a really blurred line between fantasy and science, because like they refer to things like chroma as if it were a scientific concept, but to us it seems just like them using magic, essentially, right?
Yeah, I would call this a science fantasy.
Yeah,
it's definitely fantastical, but it's not the trad fantasy of elves and dwarves. Neither is it super futuristic either. It starts in our world in a warped version of it, which is always a cool thing.
I like through the looking glass, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. And we might have gotten a little bit ahead of ourselves there, but this is a single player RPG, but quite an action heavy one. So the combat, which we will talk about in detail later, is very active. So yeah, you start the premise is that typically a group of volunteers, expeditioners, will go off in the last year of their life, say. In our case, it's year year 34, so Expedition 33 goes out or something like that.
I don't think it's always necessarily the people who are going to die, because I don't imagine that there was 95-year-olds going out on the expedition when this thing started, right?
It doesn't have to be the age that's going to disappear themselves, but I think there's some impetus like, hey, we're going to disappear anyways.
One last hurrah.
Let's do something with our last year of our lives. So that's another cool aspect of this game, is that unlike a lot of Japanese RPGs, for instance, we're not dealing with like teenagers, like your Persona games or a lot of the Final Fantasy games or things like that. You're dealing with like 30-year-olds. So these are essentially adults. They've lived a life, but they haven't lived a long life. And they all sort of share a little bit of trauma, because right from the beginning, you realize, well, there's going to be parents, say 34-year-olds, who have children, and they know they're going to disappear at 34. So what happens to their children? There's a sort of like a surrogacy or like a fostering system built in place, and then it's known that some people from the next year or younger are going to take over the responsibility of caring for the young, if they have kids at all. So it's a very, very kind of dark, melancholy, morose setting right from the beginning.
I do really appreciate, though, how they think through the implications of this setup, and how the importance of orphanages and apprenticeships are suddenly, there's a huge focus on that in the society now, and the sort of foster parent figures and going forward, and like this, the anxiety around having children. There's a couple of relationships that have clearly broken apart because of this, whether you're willing to have children or not. Basically, it obviously resonates quite a bit with sort of climate anxiety today.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about kind of speculative fiction last couple of episodes. You were talking about Black Mirror, for instance, and sort of being like relying upon sort of cheap kind of metaphors and things like that and tricks. This game, like you say, certainly thinks out the world more in a more thoughtful way. And right from the bat, right from the first few minutes of the game, there's a kind of tutorial sequence, which is like a prologue to the action starting, and it sort of sets up the world. You step into the footsteps of the protagonist at the start of the game, Gustav, and he has relationship that he has strong feelings about. One of his companions, Maël, is there as well, sort of like trying to cheer you up, and the gommage is happening. We haven't mentioned this before. The gommage is the sort of Thanos snap.
Not to be confused with the fromage, if you're being cheesy.
That's right. One is much more delicious than the other, fromage being cheese, of course. So the gommage is the snap. The people of the oldest year disappear all at once on the same day, which is really bizarre because they're clearly not all turning that age at the same time.
Yeah, but there's this weird dark celebration around this as it's happening, and or like the dancing and pomp and circumstance around it, which is, again, they have thought through how this world is coping. Basically, a lot of cope going on in this world.
Yeah, it front loads some of the trauma, some of the kind of strangeness of this world.
It also sets the stakes, right? Immediately, people are dying. Like, there's clear emotional connections with so many of these characters that are dying in this very sort of beautiful, poetic way, but dying nonetheless. And it immediately contrasted with another big moment of death that comes shortly after, which is basically the sort of D-Day, as the expedition launches off and is immediately massacred. And it's this really interesting contrast between the sort of the two contrasts of death and this sort of expected, slow, beautiful version, but the violent, unexpected death.
Yeah, and that sort of tips off something which we're going to delve into more deeply, is that the sort of like the before and after. Like the prologue very effectively sets the stage. You know about the civilized world. I think the city is called Lumiere. It's some distance from Paris, France, because you can see the Eiffel Tower in the distance. But it's warped, of course, and buildings are floating in the air, and things are crumbling around you. So that's very emotional. You can talk to a lot of side people. There's like a little bit of tutorialization in terms of combat, which I think actually they paced it wrong. They shouldn't have started with combat. They should have started with emotion. But I guess they wanted to keep action moving forward. And a lot of the side encounters are optional. but you can interact with people, game resources, and there's one of the infamous mime battles, which are quite fun, difficult battles, right from the beginning area. So
yeah,
you don't
I saw
have
the
to.
mime. I didn't realize you could fight that starting one. I have to go back, perhaps.
Yeah, it's fun. Those mime battles are nicely kind of tuned to the level you might be at when you reach a new area. So the first one is very hard because it's kind of your first real battle.
Do get a little repetitive. I think there's a bunch of mimes across the world, basically, that usually give you some kind of collectible, like the baguette skins with
yes.
with your beret, your striped shirt, your baguette strung across your back. But most of the mime fights are actually pretty much the same. But more on that later.
Yeah, so that's obviously it sets up the stakes. The gommage happened. The oldest year disappears, and then the next oldest year is like, yep, we got to do this thing, and then off they go into the expedition. Thus, Expedition 33. And I like how each expedition doesn't know what they're going to face, because lo and behold, the previous year's expeditions have not come back. They have not saved the world. You can only assume that they're sent off to their deaths because they don't send information back. Somehow, people have heard whispers about fantastical creatures that they may see along the way. And of course, wouldn't you know it, you do encounter some of those fantastic creatures.
It's not clear, though, if those creatures were around before the fracture, if they were just part of this world regularly, maybe. Or came. I think they might have preceded that.
Some sort of prequel, sort of premonition setups happening there. So basically, the expeditioners are this like grim troop, and it grows smaller. The group grows smaller and smaller every year. So there's some like gallows humor there, but they're all like, "Rah, come on, guys, buck up. We're gonna do this. Got to save our people." But they really don't know what they're gonna face until that sort of Normandy landing situation. Like,
but then the tone that I really loved, though, is just the sense that even if we don't succeed, we're setting up success for the future. Like the catchphrase, for those who come after. Is they're constantly refraining, and there's one moment that really summed it up for me fairly late in the game, but there's a section where you're skipping around these grapple hooks. Like there's all these floating islands. I'm grappling around. It's really thrilling. It's like, oh, this is awfully convenient that all of these hooks were just right where I needed them to be. Then I find a log from Expedition, 48 or whatever it was, and they're like, oh well, I think we're done, like, or on our last legs here, but I'm glad we set up these grapple points for whoever comes next. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, that's grim.
I think it's officially Expedition 69. That's not a joke. Who sets up the first kind of climbing area? But yeah, you're absolutely right. Most games would treat it like the yellow paint smudges, right? Or the white paint smudges, like Indiana Jones that you might see. Or Uncharted. That's the kind of the famous example. But this one, there's like literal mechanical grappling points that are quite obvious to see. Sometimes they're a little bit hidden because they might be under you from where you're looking at a ledge or something like that. But if they're in sight, you will notice them, which I like how they treated them that way. So shall we go into more mechanical aspects?
I just wanted to just quickly, not in terms of the story, but just in the characters, I wanted to have a quick discussion here. And that what I really appreciated about this game is just how sincere everyone is. The characters all just feel incredibly organic and natural in how they talk and communicate, and there's just this. I mean, like I said, these are 33-year-olds. They're adults. They all clearly have relationships with each other that have proceeded through the years. They've had perhaps been in relationships literally and fallen apart. There's little hints that flesh out these character relationships. But for me, I'm a little tired of games these days. Just feel so irony-pilled. Is that sort of Whedon-esque irony has come in through so many games, like Avowed we've talked about recently, and how the characters have this real sort of, did he just say that sort of vibe? These constant little asides that just take me out of the game, to be honest. And I'm going to burn off a lot of listeners right now and say that I really couldn't gel with Baldur's Gate 3 for a lot of the same reasons. But this just feels incredibly sincere in contrast to so many games. The one that actually comes to mind to me was Yakuza Like a Dragon, which also has some really wacky, silly moments. But when it needs to, it has some really sincere characterization. And like the characters in Clair Obscur swear a lot, which isn't to say that swearing equals maturity, but it always feels earned in this game. It's like, yep, you just saw your entire team massacred. I think that earns a putain.
Yeah, but as you just hinted, there's a lot of French cusses thrown in there for effect, right along with English cusses, which is ironic. Is like, aren't you supposed to be speaking French all this time, even though we're hearing it in English? So that's always what happens with localization. But yeah, you're right. The characters are obviously in it for the mission in a variety of ways. A lot of the characters, even before the expedition starts, are like, you guys are going on an expedition? That's like a fool's errand, man. Why do it? World's coming to an end anyway. And a lot of the characters, even after they get there and then they see a lot of their companions cut down, are like, well, that's it. I guess I might as well end it. And content warning, there is depictions of attempted or considered suicide. At least in one case, fairly early on. So that is a factor there. But it's really dire. But the characters are earnest. I think they're all quite likable. I wouldn't say that they seem to be very deep. Like, they seem to be like mostly kind of like sketches. Obviously, they have emotions, feelings, inspirations. They have history, but like they're not they're sort of like living for the moment, right? Because they know the end is coming. So probably they've had to jump at chances. They've had to take risks. They have felt regrets, but it's not like they have the regrets of like 30 or 40 more years on their life that they made a mistake, right? It's like, well, that happened.
Yeah, I think they are largely fleshed out a little more throughout knowing where you're at in the game. I think there is some more fleshing out to do there. But as you mentioned, another thing I really love is that being part of this expedition, or part of the resistance, for lack of a better term, is hard. Like, especially coming off of Metaphor Reef and Tarzio, which had this very sort of Saturday morning cartoon. With the power of friendship, we can all team together and beat the evil. But like, you see them struggle and relapse and despair, and just the character performances, I think, really sell that as well. There are a lot of cutscenes in this game. This isn't one of those games where you have 2-minute cutscene at the start of the game and then the rest is this character back and forth, like the shot, reverse shot lines. Like, there are so many cutscenes, quiet moments with no dialogue, that sell a lot of emotional resonance of just characters emoting with no words. I think it's a really beautiful use of cutscenes in this game. Also, like, for a not JRPG, but like for that tone of game, for so long a game, there's so many beautiful cutscenes here.
Yeah, I think you're right, and the pacing is quite good. It is very cinematic when those cutscenes come in, and you're right. Like, they are not too long, but they're not too short. There's always a temptation, like in your Final Fantasies or your Metal Gear Solids or something like that, to have like 30-minute cutscene, right? Because let's get all the exposition out of the way, and then we can focus on the action and the set pieces. And this game is not really like that. It's sort of like a drip feed, and you learn little by little. And each of the characters is giving like tidbits of their background until one of the characters sort of is starting to have these sort of visions of darker things to come. And the funny thing about these sequences, it's so French, is like they're these literal black and white art house short film moments with this. I think this is where the dialogue-less sequences you're talking about come in. There's a mysterious figure coming out of the darkness, and they're all like mysteriously dark, and their hair is kind of flowing, and it's all quite moody, and obviously a tone of cinema from a distant day. Very
watching
European.
all of Lynch's film recently really prepared me for this type of cinematography, to be honest.
Yeah, so it's really effective, though. Funny enough, it can be effective by different degrees depending on what costumes you've decided to put on your characters.
Yes,
you mentioned the baguette outfits, like sort of the mime style outfits. There are hilarious
swimsuits
styles. Yeah, hairstyles that you can get based on some of the kind of let's just say it comedic comedic characters, side characters.
Comedic relief, yeah.
Yeah, there's like fantasy races, sort of a little bit like Jim Henson style. Is they go to this world on the expedition, and they land, and there are of course lots of monsters and a lot of warped environments. There's fish floating in the air, for instance. There's lots of fantastical things they see, but they also encounter these sort of friendly comedic relief sort of characters that they still somehow fight a lot with.
It's like Minions crossed with Jar Jar Binks.
Oh my god! These characters, let's just call them what they are. I think they're in the promo artwork and this and that. They're called Gestrels, and they are kind of look like Muppets with paint brushes for heads.
Well, to me, they look like the painting models, like the wooden puppet models, with the trolls. You know, the trolls from the 80s with the long hair. Yeah,
right. Yeah, that's right. They look like that. They kind of speak in this like Monty Python. I am making fun of you, bite my teeth at your face, sort of fake French accent, which is pretty funny when you watch the English localization. And these characters are, necessary, I think. And they do give you that like
bit of levity.
Yeah, they do give you that fun Jim Henson style fantastical vibe for a while there, and then eventually there's tone shifts and this and that. But that's getting a little bit ahead of myself. I think you indicated that you played quite a bit farther than I have. I played until the end of Act 1, and it took me about 18 hours. So I didn't rush through stuff. I tried to find a lot of the collectibles and this and that. I don't know how long this game is.
I feel like 35 hours. I'm at the end. I'm sorry. I'm at the beginning of Act 3. I will say. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's interesting you mentioned that the cutscenes aren't too long. Was at the end of Act 1, it's like a nearly half-hour cutscene. But to be honest, I was so riveted, I didn't even notice. That controller timed out. I did not care. Was
it that long? I thought there was, because it's a little bit interesting because there are cutscenes in the middle of boss battles.
Yeah. It has some interesting choice of timing and sort of framing in around how it uses boss fights in a really clever way in some fashion.
Just one more thing about the story that I like, or I guess the world building that I like, is that I think people are aware that I don't really like trad fantasy that much. That's why I don't like D&D or Lord of the Rings or things like that too much. But I like weirdness. And this game certainly has a strong degree of weirdness. Like I said, the world is literally warped. You do encounter strange things like fish flying in the air and strange brush head people. And the world reminds me a lot of Numenera, which I've mentioned in the past, the cipher-based TTRPG system Numenera, which the video game Torment Tides of Numenera is also set in. So maybe some of your listeners have played that before. So just in that there are kind of weird worlds that work with different sensibilities and technologies and even use of physics than what we're used to, because it takes place in an indeterminate future. And the kind of melancholy string music that plays in the overworld maps reminded me a great degree of this fantastic, maybe one of my favorite computer RPGs from developer Troika, called Arcanum. Arcanum, a really excellent sort of steampunk fantasy RPG.
I'm not really familiar with that, no. But I mean, we do have to talk about the music at some point, though.
Music is really good, and wow, like it covers so many genres.
Incredibly eclectic, yeah, in ways that don't entirely cohere together. Like it goes from these sort of beautiful ballads and French singing into like dubstep
right
at some points.
There's some drum and bass. There's some kind of eerie kind of sort of chanting, darker pieces, moody pieces. It really covers the gamut.
There's a couple
jazz.
Yeah, like finding the Gestrels particularly, there was a couple of tracks that were like Persona style, sort of really energetic jazz in battle fights that I really enjoyed. There's a later boss fight, End of Act 2, to me sounds like sort of Nightwish, this sort of symphonic rock almost, that really hit for me. There's a lot of great tracks here, and there's so much of it. It doesn't always hit, but they use it's a strong sense of themes that carry through, and they reprise these themes and remix them in some interesting ways over time.
leitmotifs. And the composer apparently was just someone that they found on SoundCloud.
Yeah.
So there's the kind of like the bootstrapping philosophy that this studio has brought together. This is the only RPG I can think of whose battle theme is so accordion forward as
those mime hits.
This one. That's right. Yeah. So really cool world building and really fantastic artwork. I would say that it is like not to the nth degree of the most fantastical stuff I've ever seen, but it's far enough in that direction that it really pleases me.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the actual like graphical design and beyond just the story, I did feel like it was a little bit much sometimes. Not particularly cohesive, just a little too chaotic, and just like the light, like the light blur on everything was just really washed it out a lot. So I didn't love that entirely. I think it's like the Unreal Engine or one of those. Or once you see it, like all those games all look kind of the same overlay.
They threw everything in the kitchen sink sort of visual effects at you.
Yeah. I think some of the later levels, some of the areas sort of towards the end of Act 2 start to feel a little more thematic and cohesive in less chaotic and messy way, shall we say.
Yeah. All right. I'm happy with talking about the world. Okay, so we're talking about mechanics a bit. Should we talk about combat? That's a big part of it.
I think we should talk about the turn-based combat because I think that's going to be a lot to talk about there.
Yeah, well, first I'll say, as I said that, just preceding combat, there are sort of monsters roving the world. So there isn't random encounters per se, but it's the sort of fun thing where monster can sneak up on you and they get an advantage. You could sort of hit them face on and that's neutral, or you can sort of hit them from behind and manually attack them, and then you get the first strike. So it's a lot like Metaphor ReFantazio that way. It doesn't quite do the thing I like in Fantasio where it just skips battles entirely that are like so weak.
Here's the thing though, I want to be playing these mechanics. These mechanics are so good. I want to be doing the fighting.
I strongly agree.
Yeah.
I think the combat in this game is enjoyable in its own right. I can't say that about even the most popular RPG systems that are out there.
Yeah, I mean, I've only recently started to come around on turn-based RPGs. I've not had the patience for them in the past. Started to develop that patience recently, but I will say that so many times they do feel a little repetitive. Like, well, I've got the low fire attack, the high fire attack. You're managing your mana between combats, chugging all those potions. You're trying to hit the weaknesses. But this does some really interesting things, layering on a bunch of different mechanics in addition to those classic turn-based tropes.
Yeah, I think the great thing about this game is that, other RPGs, and funny enough, I'm going to mention an RPG that probably wouldn't easily compare to, but like an RPG like Borderlands, each character has its own sort of mechanisms.
It's like completely asymmetrical.
That's right, and when you in Borderlands, you only control one character, so you don't see a lot of variety. Maybe you do because you can actually respec and try one of the different character paths, but most of the time you're only kind of playing with one style. Some of them are going to be more tanky, some of them are going to be more kind of zone control and elemental effects, and others are going to be more sniping or something like that. But this game, because you control 3 characters at a time, maximum, out of however many characters you recruit, you can only control 3. Each of them plays slightly differently to each other. And every character has, of course, basic attack. They have a ranged attack, which isn't always a gun, but most often it is. All these actions take sort of action points, and the ranged attack takes 1 action point, and everything else takes 1 or more. Upwards of 5, 6, 7, I think, potentially, that you build up these sort of action points over time, and that's one of the tensions of the game is, do I spend the action points or do I let them build up?
Those action points only go from 1 to 10, and they reset between every fight. You're not having to like manage your endurance and like chug potions in between. You always know you're going to start with X number of action points, which fluctuates based on some other abilities. But you're starting from square one at the start of every fight.
Right, but typically if you max out your expenditure, you're going to have to slowly let it build up. So it builds this sort of tension of back and forth. A basic attack will let you build up those action points. So that's very cool as well. But despite those similarities, all the characters play quite differently. I think what Gustav is mostly tank-like, and what's the character Lune has these sort of what are they called? Stains.
It's basically, they remind me a lot of the defect in Slay the Spire. You're basically building up these orbs. She generates these orbs and then can spend them for additional effects for later attacks.
Yeah, she has like 4 quadrants, and she can store upwards of various colors of stains, and then she can expend them to give extra effects to her abilities. So that's quite tactical and interesting. And Mayal, who's the kind of rounds out the first 3 characters. What is her thing really?
Stances. Like she switches between like a defensive stance, an offensive stance, which like doubles her attack, or it's like 150 attack, and then there's the virtuoso stance, which is like 200% attack.
That's pretty much a direct lift of I think it's the Wraith character,
the Watcher. I think in
Slay the Spire. The Watcher, the purple character class from the Slay the Spire. So this game is like liberally lifting lots of
mechanics all over the place.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think that why this combat speaks to you and me, because it's very much tabletop thinking. It's very very much tabletop strategy, card combos, comboing, the sort of the triggers that really pleases me anyways, but I think it speaks to tabletop game players.
Well, it doesn't have the sort of randomization of what cards you're going to draw, because each character has 6 abilities. You can going into each fight, you'll have 6 abilities, but you might have 20 to 30 to choose from. And so once you set your abilities, which is like deck building in of itself, you've stacked what your abilities are. Then you know they're going to be static. You're always going to have these 6 abilities going into this fight. So there's no randomization in that sense, but it does have that sort of synergy building sense of building a deck before the fight. But curiously to me, all of these abilities are they're like multi-use cards. They all do multiple things. Whereas in your traditional turn-based RPG, you might have this attack does medium physical damage. This attack does medium fire damage. This attack applies poison. Everything here does like 3 things. You might have say Lune has an attack, does medium fire damage, applies burn, which is like a damage over time. But then it says if you've got these stains, if she already had these stain orbs, it'll consume those orbs and apply a marked, which is like an additional debuff. But then it also in itself generates stains for future turns. So you've got the initial attack, you've got payoff from a previous attack, and you're setting up for a future attack. And you might only want one of those things. Or if you've set yourself up really well, you might be making use of all 3 of them. And there's this really push and pull tempo as you're constantly balancing everything.
That's an excellent example, but that only covers one character.
Yeah.
Now you have to consider that other characters like Mael has an effect that increases burn damage.
Well, it's like playing Slay the Spire co-op, but solo, right? Like you're balancing 3 characters at once.
Yeah, and the balancing of that and characters using their abilities on each other. It's not to say that there is no randomness. There's actually a degree of effectiveness. So, for instance, if I use an effect that revived a character or healed a character, it might heal between 30 and 70%. So that's a big degree of randomness. You don't know essentially what balance of creatures you're going to run into. Although typically when you run into one enemy on the over map, you run into all of the enemies within line of sight, it seems.
Sort of hoovers them in, within close proximity.
But to a maximum of, what is it, 3
I think,
opponents?
Yeah.
Which is already interesting in its own case. Some of the characters have quite visible weak spots that if you attack them with a gun or the ranged weapon, that they have an extra bonus effect. And even other characters there's a sort of class of characters that are of opponents that are sort of flyers. So they are better at dodging melee attacks. So you want to be attacking them with ranged attacks. And some of them even have floating orbs or something that are cause additional explosive effects. So there's a lot of layers to this, and it speaks to the sort of tactical where tactics meet strategy that I really enjoy.
And here's the thing, debuffs work on everything. So many of these games, poison is really helpful on these random filler enemies. But as soon as you hit a boss, none of your sleep or poison abilities work. Here, everything works, and it gives you the full arsenal to balance and take advantage of.
There are resistances,
sometimes, but very rare, I think.
Yeah, and some bosses, for instance, might even introduce their original gimmicks. So I think this is a thing that many RPGs, especially JRPGs, have introduced over the years. That there's a gimmick which is just a mechanism that exists only for that one boss battle. And like the end of Act 1 boss, for instance, introduces a pretty interesting sort of sequence-based gimmick.
Well, there's like a few secret sort of optional bosses around that are incredibly unique. One that just bounces up and down on top of you constantly, and you just got to parry. But more on parrying later.
Parrying, dodging, shooting. We covered. We mentioned that combat in this game is very active. So while it is ostensibly turn-based, you can wait as long as you want to before choosing one of the menu items. In addition to the ranged attack, there's 3 tints that you can utilize, which are sort of like one-off items. There are upwards of 6 abilities which you can sort of slot as you unlock them over time. You can buy them from vendors. You start off with a couple, and they can come in a range of different action point costs. So that is a very critical part to developing your character, is choosing which abilities you will unlock from the sort of the branching character tree.
It's quite overwhelming. Even just that, looking at one ability tree for one character, it can be very overwhelming in which ones you choose. Because each action, each ability is doing 3 different things.
It is. It's quite deep, and for people who love building their team,
like theory crafting. This is big for theory crafting.
This is a catnip for that sort of thing. Particularly, which I don't know if we want to jump into character customization yet.
But let's talk about like the pictos and luminas. I think is the next sort of step.
Yeah, you want to tell us about pictos?
So you basically, as you explore, you start collecting these pictos, which are additional effects that might say on your ranged attack or your free range attack, you have a 25% chance of doing burn. When you do a base attack, when you do a ranged attack, when you apply when you apply a debuff, you double the amount of debuffs that you apply. And very quickly, you've got 30 of these. And each character can equip 3, so again, another layer of sort of synergy and character deck building. But then I think when you win 4 combats with a character with these equipped, they basically unlock, and now you can equip them on any character. There's a secondary menu called Lumina, where you can equip a number of these. You have a points that you can unlock. It's this optional thing you can buy or find across the world. You start out with like 10 points. You can get up to like 100. I think I've got each of my characters have 100 points that you can basically spend to equip further picto abilities. And some of these range in cost from like 1 through 30. They range in effectiveness, but you can really double down on further customization. Like one of my characters, I have all of the free aim boosts. So if I need to shoot something, CL is gonna be the one to do it for me. I've got one that's like focused on some healing abilities, and like when you apply this buff, it also applies this buff, which also applies this buff, and they sort of stagger. And you can really customize and specialize your characters in some fascinating ways. I will say the UI pretty terrible. I mean, apart from the fact that it's overwhelming, there's just within 5 hours, you've got like 50 different options for what to equip on your characters, and navigating the menu a little tricky. So I've not really. Every so often I'll go in and tweak it around. I haven't played with it as much as I'd like to, just because it's so fiddly to change. But there's a lot. If you like this sort of thing, so many options there.
So funny story. Someone I know, it's not me, definitely not me, didn't really follow the instructions, and I didn't know not me, this person I know, didn't know what Lumina was for until after beating
I've heard
the
this
Act
a lot.
1 boss.
Yeah, that people didn't realize this was even an option.
So let's just admit it was me. Accidentally was playing on hard mode because I didn't utilize my like 30 Lumina points per character. until after the most difficult boss that I've encountered as far yet, which goes to show that just with like tenacity, timing, and patience, you can get through a lot of the hardest boss battles. Most of the battles aren't that hard.
Yeah, I'll be honest, like pretty quickly I was hitting the point where I was beating everything within one round. Which to be honest, I wish the game was harder. I could bump up the difficulty. I don't want to go that hard on it, but I found it a little too easy. This I wanted to engage with these systems more. I wanted that sense of sort of setup and payoff, but I
Turn
was
the
very
Lumina
quickly
off.
obliterating everything. Yeah,
Turn the Lumina off. I promise you, you will face defeat.
But I mean, if I was fiddling with that Lumina, it'd be even easier. You could really like exploit the system. And it's a game that doesn't care if you break it. It kind of wants you to get in there and create these sort of master builds and break the game apart.
Yeah, it wants you to get under the hood and really tinker, which is something I really appreciate. And yeah, the UI is bunk, but the parts, the ideas are good.
I'd love to see a second pass at this, and like, I mean, it's possible they'll add some options. It does feel that sort of, I mean, this is the first game from the developer. I know these most of the people there are pros and like ex Ubisoft people. A lot of this does feel like your first game syndrome. There are a lot of sort of rough edges that need to be sanded off. But hopefully they add some more features. Like just seeing which menu item I've selected. It's so hard to see where I'm selecting of these 5 characters or which Lumina I've selected because there's no contrast.
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of the time I've been playing this on a small screen. I've been doing like GeForce Now and things like that on my Lenovo Legion Go. I even tried it on my Retroid Pocket 5, which has a 5-inch screen. Still works. But the UI is really not meant to be that small, so it is fiddly to be sure. By the way, those Pictos, you're right, they can you can load up 3 at a time. It's kind of cool how they don't themselves level up, but you unlock higher level ones as you progress through the game.
Yeah, it's never clear when they level up. Sometimes like a Pictos level 5 will go to a Pictos level 15, and I'm not sure what's triggered that exactly. Whether it's just because I picked up a second copy of it, it's just doubled itself or something. I'm not sure, but
yeah, there seems to be multiples within like a theme or something like that.
Because they're also adding like they're also boosting your stats and something.
That's right.
Like they give you a speed boost or a crit boost.
They have each of them has both a stat boost and a passive effect.
And there's weapons. Each character has like different weapons. Like they might have a dozen weapons, and each one has like 3 different abilities in of itself. So
they can be leveled up individually by spending resources.
Synergies for days here, man.
Only at specific places, though. I was a little frustrated that I was collecting a lot of these side resources and I didn't know what to do with them. And the game doesn't explain that either. Eventually, at this thing called camp, which, funny enough, camp always looks the same regardless of where in the world you are. At camp, you will encounter this character at some point, and that character will let you spend those resources to level up your weapons and to buy certain... I think that's where you buy...
Well, you can add the Lumina points, basically.
That's where you add the Lumina points.
You can just dump all the Lumina points onto Mayel if you want and just make her an absolute unit.
Sure. And you can also level up the tints, which are, I think, the 3 that I've encountered are heal, add AP, or revive.
Yeah, those are the 3 throughout the game. But I do appreciate how the potion system basically is so simplified. It's basically Estus flasks from Dark Souls. You're not dealing with I've got 5 potions that do plus 50 health. I've got 5 potions that do plus 200 health. I've got 3 potions that do health to all of my characters. Yeah. There's no menu inventory in terms of that side, at least.
That's the thing here, is that this developer has really quite deftly lifted a lot of mechanisms from, as we've mentioned, from Souls-likes, from card-based roguelikes, from JRPGs, from CRPGs, and they sort of like picked and chose those and streamlined a lot of things and managed to craft this combat system that is not something that has to be slogged through, but is actually enjoyable. So there's a lot of things going for it, despite the fact that there are some rough edges, like you mentioned, a lot of kind of first time game syndrome issues. I don't know. I think the story's a little meh itself, but the world is cool. And that's what I appreciate about it.
Speaking of the Dark Souls influences, I think we need to talk a little bit about the parrying system.
Sure.
In that, in the combat, when you perform an attack against an enemy, for one thing, there's it'll give you these quick time events. Usually, there's like one or two. Press A at these moments, you'll get a little boost, and those are a little tight. They do actually give you an indicator to so you can see when you've got to press the button, and that will give you a little boost to. It might give you some more heals or generate some AP. There are some varying effects that you get when you nail those. It's not just plus damage, but then when the enemies attack you, you can either dodge or you can parry. Basically, at the moment that they hit, you can press either one of a couple of different buttons to dodge or parry. And curiously, like in Yakuza Like a Dragon had a similar system where it might do like minus 20% health or damage. It was slightly reduced the amount of damage you take. Here, it completely negates all damage, which is a really interesting tempo that this adds to the game. The dodge is a little bit easier to, like, the timing window is a little more open than the parry. But if you do the parry, you also get a counter attack. You attack the enemy back, and that often like applies more debuffs and like can easily kill enemies just on the counter attack alone. There was a boss I mentioned earlier where basically you have to parry every attack, and that's the only way to win the battle is just by countering every time they bounce on you, basically. But yeah, it's this really fascinating extreme. It's like a single button press could be the difference between your character being one shot or you taking 0 damage and dealing a whole bunch of damage back to the enemy. And there's this huge range of this spread of how, the differences between one button press.
Yeah, for me, parry doesn't exist because I don't use it. But dodge does. I use dodge liberally, and you do sort of feel like a god when someone
when you nail them. It feels pretty great. Yeah,
it feels so good to have none. This thing that could just whoop your ass. Have a 3-hit combo on you, and you perfectly time each of them, and it tells you dodged or perfect. And perfect, both of them negate the damage, but I think perfect counts for is a trigger for other bonuses. Some of those pictos, for instance.
Yeah, like you can have a whole bunch of them that give you extra AP or heal you when you dodge, or parry effectively. So you can really double down on that if you want to.
Yeah. Additionally, there is a third thing that you can do to mitigate damage, which at certain times characters will do a big blow.
There's jump as well.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. You can jump, and when you jump, you're also given an opportunity to counterattack as well.
There's another one. There's another sort of ultimate attack that you haven't seen yet maybe.
Okay.
So they keep layering on systems.
Stuff to look forward to.
Yeah.
So this game is doing a lot of things good. We're getting a little long in time there, but I do want to mention just a couple more things from my side. I've played less than you, so maybe you have a lot more to say. But I want to just point out something I appreciate about this game is that there's really just one main quest. And it always tells you, every time we go back to camp, you have like a little menu option that says, remind me what I'm supposed to be doing again. And it'll tell you what your next objective is. It's not that as though there isn't side activities. There definitely are. It seems actually really linear early in the game. It was something I was nervous about, is that there was a lot of like linear sections, basically no overworld. In the first overworld, it shows up and it's pretty linear anyway. I was quite concerned that this was going to be a kind of like a run down the corridor like Final Fantasy 13 game. But lo and behold, as you go further, I think I've had like 3 overworld areas. First of all, lots of games don't have overworlds anymore, or in that kind of fashion anymore, where there's like you got a tiny little character running between these sequences that you warp into, and then the actual full size.
It took me a long time to realize there was a map for that overworld, though. I really needed that map, and I only found it in like Act 3, and I realized it was there.
Yeah, and the overworld is a little bit weird too, because like you get like little previews of like the sort of landmarks that you will see in a given level, quote unquote, if you go into that. But certain things in the distance, the landmarks seem really close, but they're not that close.
It's all the map is very much abstracted and sort of
definitely
warped. Yeah,
definitely. But so that's what I like, is that there's only really one main quest. There are side quests, that you will be given very organically. You only get them through talking to people, essentially.
Yeah.
And this is not like a Ubisoft style game where you have, or even like a Elder Scrolls, where you have a menu that has one main quest, 7 guild quests, and then like 50 side quests. You don't really have anything like that. The emphasis is on the main sequence, and you can dilly-dally as much as you want and do as much side activities as you want, but there doesn't seem to be a formal side quest system.
No, there are side quests, but there's no log. Curiously,
yes.
I would have liked that, because oftentimes I found a rock that a particular gestural wanted or whatever, and like, which location was the gestural? Because they all sort of blur together, and they're sort of in their chaos, these levels, and there's no, like, if you look at the map, there are names, but you can't really, there's no information on which ones you've completed or visited. It's really hard to figure out what's what. I need like either a log system or somebody to mark the map, places needed to return to. It was a little confusing in that sense, I will say.
Yeah, I didn't mind not having the journal, because it's just like one less thing to stress about. It just kind of mostly drives you forward. And if you do want to seek out that secondary stuff, you can. It's just a little bit more effort, which I don't mind. Feels more like an adventure when you have to seek these sort of things out yourself, rather than it's a to-do list, like so many
I do like
modern
that. Yeah,
games are.
they are very clearly. I mean, in many ways, they are the anti-Ubisoft. Because a lot of these people have come from Ubisoft explicitly, and especially with the map design, or sorry, the level design. Like when you're in a particular level, in that there is no map. There's no mini map, and then they've explicitly said they don't want the player just staring at the mini map rather than the actual level. I really appreciate that. I think so many, especially Ubisoft open world style games, you're just staring at the little icons in that mini map, and that is like an anathema to immersion. Right.
Right.
I think this does go a little bit too far in that extreme, and that I don't know where I'm going. These levels all loop around and very disorienting, especially with the chaos of the world design. And there's like 3 branching paths, and I have no idea which is the critical path and which is the one with the sort of the hidden lumina.
Branching, yeah.
And I get really confused. Like, I've had to double back multiple times trying to figure out which is the optional path, which is the main path.
Agreed, and you'll definitely miss stuff, and then I think that's okay. Games,
Yeah.
it's nice when you have missable things. Otherwise, it would just be a linear path that you couldn't fall off of anyway. So I appreciate that. I don't think it's a fault, and people will take or leave those kind of side activities as they like them. So there's very good stuff in here. Aside from that, I don't have a lot to dip into. Like, the performances are pretty good, and there's a lot of emoting. There's a lot of melodrama, but all the characters are generally endearing, and the ones that are supposed to be more doomy gloomy do that well as also.
I think it understands that characters and relationships and emotion is as important, if not more so, than just story. Like I said, it doesn't care about dropping the exposition of the history of this world and who the paintress is and all the lore. It cares about these characters and their feelings more than anything else. And I think that's what really sells this game to a large extent.
Yeah, and the funny thing is that the protagonist, Gustav, anyways, is a historian, and you do find these logs along the way. Of the previous 70 60 70 expeditions, because it's counting down, but funny enough, they're not that long, and they're just kind of like these like little side stories. They're sort of like the novels, the in-universe books in Elder Scrolls or something like that. You don't have to listen to them.
It's got a bit of pathos in there as well, and the different experiences that these other expeditions had.
Yeah, I feel like the most emotional part of it was that Gustav, right from the beginning of the game, has these apprentices, which I guess maybe all the adult characters have apprentices, but he in particular has these apprentices, and I think they even said like they built his mechanical arm.
Yes.
His prosthesis. And they are like, oh, good luck on your expedition. You're gonna kick butt and whatever. We'll really miss you, Gustav. And he's like, you kids, you're good guys. keep fighting there for the future, yada yada. And he carries this journal with him, and that every time you're at camp, you can choose to write in your journal for your apprentices. And I thought that was very sort of wistful, kind of a little, it tugs at your heartstring. Is like, yeah, I'm doing this for you, sort of thing.
It was this huge overarching theme of like, what do we leave behind for for future generations? How do we set them up for success, basically,
right?
And at what cost?
Even if Gustav doesn't make it back, as we've seen so far with the previous expeditions, those apprentices might be one of the future expeditions who finds that journal sometime down the road on their expedition. So that's the constant theme.
Yeah, so many resonant themes. I really appreciated the delivery in that story there. I will say, bouncing back a little bit to things like that parrying system, like as much as I like each component part of this game, I do feel like they don't always work together. It's a little bit of a chimera or exquisite corpse. Each particular element is really strong, and they sometimes clash. Like that core combat mechanic, I love it, but the parrying system is so overtuned that like combat is more likely solved by parrying than actually engaging with that combat system. Or I've spent too long exploring that I'm just one-shotting everything. So you can go up to basically a final, like an ultimate secret end boss early in the game and beat it just by parrying every attack because you're going to cancel everything out. And like there are multiple ways of approaching the game. You could double down on that. You could just do the theory crafting sort of building and focus on that side of things. So there are a few different approaches, but ultimately I think the tuning is a little bit off, that I didn't let me engage with that core mechanic as much as I'd like. Maybe I've been exploring too much and just over leveled myself. I'm not sure, but I just some of the difficulty tuning, I think this needs a little bit of retweaking there. But ultimately, the individual parts are so strong that I'm overlooking all of these issues. I mean, I hinted at this last episode in talking about Blueprints and how it had flaws too, but here those flaws are just completely sanded away by the strength of this game. And at the moment, this is my game of the year by far.
If you want a challenge, just be like me. Don't engage in parrying at all, and don't engage in Lumina at all, and you'll instantly give yourself hard mode, and it'll be all the more fun for that. No, I'm just a dummy, and I will probably enjoy it more now that I've discovered those.
So one thing we didn't talk about, have you discovered any of the optional sort of gestural challenges that are hidden around the world?
The combats?
Well, there's the arenas, but then there's the jumping puzzles. There's a volleyball mini game. There's a few, like they're all on the beach. The gestural beaches basically is what you're looking for.
I haven't
really wacky.
There are areas on the map that you're supposed to access later, because they've been sort of intentionally blocked off. You can see past the blockage, but you don't have a method to get past those yet. So I don't know. I kind of got bored and I just moved ahead and skipped a lot of those things. So I didn't encounter a lot of those, but I did some of the combat arenas, which are optional, which is a great way to level up specific characters. If you want to, you found that because when you access them, you didn't get them all at the same time. You might want to level up one more than another. That's a good way to do that. And then there's like the kind of missing gesturals as sort of scavenger hunt as well. Activity.
Go check out those beaches. They are incredibly frustrating, like those jumping puzzles. It reminds me, Final Fantasy 15 had one of these. That was an endgame dungeon that was basically entirely like just you having to jump over obstacles. And this is something similar. It's like it was a game on Steam recently. It was all about like just jump up as high as you can, don't fall down. A little bit of Bed-It Foddy's Get Over It, right? One of those.
Yeah.
But the payoff, the costume you get, I lost it. I was literally guffawing out loud when I saw what the reward was.
The 3D platforming in the game is not strong.
No, a bit loosey goosey. Yeah.
After playing so many tight 3D platformers recently, that it was disappointing. That said, I don't think this game promised that it was going to be a
it's not the focus
3D platformer
until it is.
But it has that. It includes that. I think we should talk about dessert.
Absolutely, yeah. I think we've praised Expedition 33 enough.
Yeah, it's a tasty meal. Keep playing it. I'm going to keep playing it for sure. It's a really solid game.
Excellent. Okay.
All right, you want to start us off?
Yeah, where am I? So for dessert, I recently spoke about reading the Sprawl trilogy for the Shelved by Genre podcast, of sort of book club podcast that I listen to. They've just started their next sort of module, which is on post-apocalyptic fiction. And reading the first book in that is A Canticle for Leibowitz. And this is a book I'd had recommended multiple times before, and by the cover and the name, I think I subconsciously dismissed it as being very sort of literary and not exactly my jam. But from the first chapter, it's incredibly obvious that this is basically Fallout. This was a huge influence, clearly, on the Fallout video games, and in that it's post-apocalyptic. It's set in an abbey, like an abbey of monks after the nuclear Armageddon, several hundred years after, and basically rediscovering knowledge. I mean, these monks are basically preserving knowledge. It's a little bit of obviously what is it? The Brotherhood of Steel is basically the analog here, but these are Catholic monks, sort of piecing back together the knowledge of the world following the apocalypse. But they find a literal Fallout shelter, and there's skeleton fiction. There's a skeleton. They're trying to figure out how the skeleton died. So you've got that environmental storytelling there. But I mean, it does get beyond that in that it actually spans 3 different periods. Like I think over 1,000 years. Like there's 3 different acts. So it starts out sort of very like basically all knowledge has been set back, and everyone has sort of started out in this very tribal means, and then moving forward into this more sort of medieval Roman, like the new Rome, that you Fallout New Vegas tribes have come up, and barbarian tribes and whatnot, and then you get to basically the future, and the spaceships are back again. It is quite dire in terms of exploring the cyclical nature of human violence and stupidity, obviously, but there is a lot of fascinating sci-fi concepts. I think that first one specifically, where they're tying together the relationship to the old world and piecing together, like that classic trope of they're finding something from before the explosion and trying to figure out what it is, but it doesn't get distracted with like trying to figure out, oh, it was clearly this thing, and they've done this really stupid misinterpretation of it. It's usually quite clear what it is, but they do play with sort of representation and how they interpret the past world in some fascinating ways. And it's surprisingly funny too, I will say. There's some really clever wordplay back and forth. I think the later half of it does get a little bit into sort of people talking in boardrooms for my liking, but still some strong concepts. It is very like it is extremely Catholic. Somehow the one thing that survived the nuclear apocalypse is the Catholic Church, relatively untouched somehow. So it does treat that as somehow of a given, as a inevitability. So your mileage may vary there, but it isn't particularly dogmatic in how it treats religion. I don't think it's surprisingly humanist. Like all of the priests are like your cool hip sort of Sunday school teacher vibe. They're not the stern priest tropes in there. But yeah, really enjoyed A Canticle for Leibowitz.
I just wanted to say that upon hearing you speak about this in our Discord, that I seeked out A Canticle for Leibowitz on Libby, the library app, and it didn't have a copy, but it sort of like connected to the Palace Project, which is another, I guess, library lending app that's freely available, and Canticle for Leibowitz was like instantly available. I don't know if it's limited copies, but it was freely available for me to borrow, so I borrowed it right now from the Palace Project app, and other Canadians in my situation should be able to. Just need a library card. So it's legal way to access that book. So I just started. Also, seems interesting.
Yeah, I mean, written in 1959, and it does not show its age. I will say it reads surprisingly like modern. Like it doesn't feel particularly dated in that sense.
Yeah, it's a Hugo Award winner.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to talk about my piece briefly. It's anime this time. I talked about novel last time, so I'm going to talk about anime this time. It's called Overlord. I watched it on Netflix. And some stuff I like to read manga first, mostly for timing reason. Is like I can read like a whole volume of a manga, which is like 8 chapters in an afternoon, whereas it takes me many hours of screen time to get through that. So I watch anime and sci-fi shows over lunch, essentially, on TV there. And this one is isekai. It's fairly popular, I think. It's got like at least 4 seasons, I think, on Netflix. And like a lot of isekai, if you're not familiar, is about basically like reincarnation fantasies. So you typically a modern day Japanese person, you get hit by a truck. 95% of the time you got hit by a truck for some reason. And then you get reincarnated most often in a fantasy world. And a lot of the time, the fantasy world is based on a video game, RPG sort of setup. And sometimes you literally get reincarnated in a video game. So this one basically follows that. I don't know why the character died in this case. It doesn't really matter because that's the first 2 minutes of the story. In this first episode starts, you are, funny enough, you're like a guild master, the last member of an RPG MMO guild that's in the server before an RPG shuts down for good. So that's an interestingly modern premise that's happened to a lot of people over the years as MMOs die over time. And you know, it's a little sad as the second penultimate character logs off, human logs off, and then you're the last one, and the main character is this sort of like skull-faced overlord, dark lord type character. And he's surrounded by like NPCs. He's surrounded by his minions, but all the minions are played as these sort of fantastical fantasy RPG Japanese tropes. So they're all very, very tropey. There's a decent amount of fan service in here. So if you get kind of weirded out by that, I wouldn't recommend it for that reason. It's not overpowering in the sense that it's a part of every episode, but it's strong enough in some episodes that it may turn you off. Definitely not kid-friendly stuff here. So my challenge with this particular isekai is I don't love isekai. I think it's kind of cheap. It's a too popular genre. There's hundreds and thousands of manga and anime.
I mean, it's
isekai.
It's based so much on wish fulfillment. Basically,
yes.
Power fantasy, wish
Power
fulfillment.
fantasy, yeah, absolutely, and it's really a reflection about ennui and disillusionment with modern life. A lot of the fantasies are life is so dreary and so hard. I'm never gonna find someone to love. I'm never gonna have a meaningful job. I'm never gonna be rich. I'm never gonna be happy. So I should just die and live my fantasy forever. Be reincarnated in this thing I love, like a video game or a fantasy story or something like that. So most of the time, you're super weak loser in the real world, and you become this overpowered thing in the fantasy world.
It's like these people wishing that you could go back to like medieval Europe and just be a peasant.
A lot of the ones are, ironically and quite sadly, hey, I was able to start a farm and live without a landlord and own property and have friends and lovers and whatever. But in this case, you start off as overpowered. You're literally a guild leader. You're the only last character left ironically, you're an evil overlord. So I guess you could be evil characters. And the only really interesting thing about this is that the server ends, but somehow the character doesn't leave the MMO world. So it's a sort of a mystery. It's like, why is this still happening? The character never leaves that fantasy world, from what I've seen. He just continues to stay in there. But I sort of misspoke there. He does leave that fantasy world, but he and his minions and his palace gets transported into another fantasy world. Sort of like teleported into a different game per se.
They use the same servers for the next game, perhaps.
maybe that's the premise. Yeah. That hasn't been revealed to me yet. I'm only 7 or 8 episodes in. But essentially, my problem with this story is it's definitely interesting. That's why I keep watching it for 7 or 8 episodes. I'm not going to watch it all 4 seasons. I don't think it's worth it. But it's backwards. The storytelling is backwards because the character is too strong. He just like destroys everything. Nothing is challenging to him. He acts like sort of a powerful lord and genius, but he's kind of a dummy. Like he doesn't understand the world that he is in. And all of his minions are just like literal bots. They're literal NPCs, so they don't have a lot of depth. Their overarching characteristics are loyalty and or lust for the main character.
It's hard to maintain stakes when it's literally a video game, right?
Yeah, and also the other NPCs that he runs into are theoretically bots as well. So like, what's going on here? This is just like power fantasy fulfillment. So for that reason, I wouldn't recommend it. It's just sort of counter to the whole hero's journey arc, which a lot of Western stories, particularly fantasy stories, have that, right? So many people just like abide by and applaud the hero's journey, the Joseph Campbell hero's journey arc. You know, George Lucas did for Star Wars, for instance, of the humble character meets a wise person who sets them off on a journey, and they learn and sacrifice and lose, and then they become powerful. So nothing zero to hero sort of arc. In this game, it like totally flips that. I'm not saying it has to be a hero's journey arc to be good, but the stakes aren't there. The storytelling and the pacing is really up and down. You just really don't know where things are going. And the only thing that's keeping me going is sort of like, what is the answer to the mystery of why he got transported there? Otherwise, like, the action is good, the animation is good. It's a fairly modern anime, so it uses a lot of like CG animation for like the skeletons and the dragons and things like that. So the battles are big and explosive and stuff like that. But it's, if you're a fan of that, you'll probably know if you enjoy it. Otherwise, it's not very deep, not the best isekai. It doesn't have charming characters like Konosuba. It doesn't have interesting world building like Reincarnated as a Slime. Not the best isekai out there.
Yeah, probably not checking that out, partly because I cancelled my Netflix recently. But I did recently talk about Shangri-La Frontier. Not technically an isekai, because it is literally just the character playing a video game. Yeah. But it does play with a lot of the same tropes, and it escaped a lot of the sort of misogynistic fan service elements, I felt, at least. So I'd recommend checking that out, perhaps, if you need something fresher.
Yeah, I didn't love Shangri-La Frontier. It's a little bit overwrought. A lot of things don't make sense in that story, but it is trying new stuff, and there are interesting ideas, for sure. Cool. All right, shall we leave it there?
I think so.
Okay, so we had a long talk, and wow, what a great game. Clair Obscur Expedition 33 is well worth playing, and it was cool to go more in depth with you again.
Yes, yeah, a lot of fresh ideas there that have sort of revitalized my interest in that genre. So, with that said, if you have any thoughts or comments on Clair Obscur or any other topics we've discussed today, you can contact us at omnigamersclub@gmail.com or at our website, omnigamers.club.
Yep, check out our videos on YouTube. We put them out every episode. And if you haven't subscribed there or left comments, please do that. Leave a positive rating. That would really help us out. And also subscribe to us in audio form on your podcatcher of choice. That's where you can see some of our older pre-video episodes there. If you want to hear our discussion on older games, still good ones. And you can always send us a comment about those as well. We really appreciate any feedback that you can give. It keeps us motivated to go on.
Yes, always appreciated. And thank you, Mark. Thanks, everyone, for listening.
That's right. And until next time, I hope you all have a very balanced diet of gaming.
Bye.
Bye.